Warning: the following video contains references to smoking. Smoking can lead to lung cancer, shortness of breath, and probably other stuff. Do not smoke if you are under the age of 21, under penalty of death. Or something like that. Alrighty. In 2003, the director Jim Jarmusch released the film Coffee and Cigarettes. It is comprised of 11 short vignettes, with 24 actors or actresses between them. Each actor plays a character often based on themselves in some way, such as sharing the same name, acting background, or personal connections. Thankfully, you won't get secondhand smoke while watching the movie, but you will get an interesting 95 minutes of film, ranging from absurd conversation and music history to down-to-earth depictions of people interacting as strangers, strained friends, family, and longtime colleagues. All this is presented in a way that invites you to be inspired by others and to reflect on the world as an expression of conversation. So I figured, why not make a map about it? I'm Quincy, and today's movie map is on coffee and cigarettes, with a strong emphasis on the coffee. For this project, I think it would be cool to see the connections between the actors in each scene. The film, to me, is not really focused on the locations the characters are at, and it feels more like the interaction between the people is what's important. One of the main through lines connecting the vignettes is personal connection, and since the actors are basically playing a version of themselves, I think this is justification enough to focus on that part. Plus, I couldn't consistently find where each scene was filmed or even supposed to be set, so there's that. You can call me lazy, but I prefer flexible. Our map will mainly be using point locations of the actors' hometowns with lines visually connecting them. In the program I'll be using, Esri's ArcGIS Pro, the easiest way for me to make the map of these features is by using a comma-separated value table, or CSV table, to collect and manage our data assets in an informationally comprehensive and robust data formatting model, standardized to fit our cartographic needs and software prerequisites. Now, while it may sound super complicated, actually it's going to be super easy. We basically just use an Excel table to keep track of stuff and tell the computer where to put it. To do this, we open up Excel, and in the first row list some attributes that we think may be useful. Since we know that all the actors were in the same room as each other when filming, there is no point in mapping that, but we can show the distance between the relevant actor's place of birth, as I think that would be a more compelling map. We make sure to keep the field names under 10 letters long and no spaces. We can add and remove fields later if needed, so this is good for now. In the rows, we fill in the information. In this case, we get the Y, X, or latitude, longitude information for everyone by Googling where they were born and extracting the coordinates in decimal degrees. Since there are only 11 scenes and 24 actors and actresses in the movie, we can do this by hand. But if there were several hundred rows of information, we would want a completely different process. Note that most of the actors don't have places of birth more specific than a city, so I'm just going to find a place that makes sense to me. I also never realized Cate Blanchett was from Australia, so it kind of makes one think what an Aussie-fueled Galadriel-Thor duel would be like, or a Hela-Thor team-up if she wanted to join the world, not destroy it. We now save the file as a CSV, and we have all we need to get started. To begin, we find where we save the table.
Five minutes later.
Once we do, we'll simply drag it into our project. Now, when we refresh our map, we see that nothing has changed, and that is because it is currently just a standalone table without being displayed as anything. In order to have our XY data display, we have to go through the operation of displaying that XY data. While there are a lot of different ways to accomplish a given task in this program, I haven't found a better one for this step. The process I use involves right-clicking our table, displaying the XY data, and pressing OK. We now begin this workflow by right-clicking our table, display XY data, and then click OK. Our so-called shapefile, so-called because it is called so I presume, has been successfully created and is automatically added to our project. We can also see our points on the map, which is good. Let's go ahead and right-click our map, Properties, and change the projected coordinate system to the best world projection. Just search Robinson and under World, add to favorites so you can easily access it in the future. Changing the projection doesn't actually affect the point coordinate data, just how they are displayed. One of the first things we notice right away is that there are a lot of points in the New York City area. We can see that there are 8 actors from the city. This makes sense as Jim Jarmusch spent a lot of time in New York City, both during the no-wave era in the late 70s, but also later in his career. Some of the actors in Coffee and Cigarettes he even met there and has worked with on other projects, both before and since. For us though, it means we are going to have some difficulty in mapping this high-density cluster area. We'll worry about that later. There are a lot of ways we can show the connections we are looking for on a map, but for today, I think I'm going to go with lines connecting them. I want to keep this project with the sense of it being made, or at least partially made, by hand. Don't worry though, I'll overcomplicate things later. For now, we will do the slightly inefficient, yet straightforward approach of getting the mathematical distances between the actors who interact with each other. We'll make the connecting lines more aesthetic in a bit, but for now, we're going to let the computer do some accurate math for us. Let's go to Insert, Distance and Direction, make sure Points is selected with Map Point tool enabled, set to Miles, and select one of the points. As you can see, the line is set to Geodetic, which calculates the shortest path in the real world, taking into account the curvature of the Earth and stuff. We will keep it Geodetic, connect it up to another person in the same scene, and then we'll try to run, taking a long time, and we were not in an edit session. Turn that on and try again. Perfect! I'll add these measurement lines for each actor pairing, and for the scenes with 3 actors, I will create a line for each pairing combination. Coffee time! The super speed Quincy makes those connections. I do want to point out that one of the great things about mapping is that there are lots of ways to accomplish the same result, and while this is technically not the best, I am doing it this way because I think it shows how the process can be done in a way reminiscent of how you might do it without any computers, gathering each relevant combination and marking the distance on the side of the map. Once we have all 15 connection variations made, the Lee twins using the same connection, we will actually turn off this layer for now and come back to it later. Now that we have our points for the actors' birthplaces, and we have the distances between their fellow co-stars for each scene, we are finally ready to make it all look nice, after saving our edits, of course. And a quick coffee break. Looking at the IMDb technical specifications for the movie, we find that the film was shot at 1.85 to 1 aspect ratio. When we go to Insert, New Layout, Custom Page Size, and enter 14 by 7.57, we get a ratio very similar to that. Our map disappeared, and that is simply because we are looking at our final presentation slate, and we haven't added anything to it yet. We go to our map frame, click on the map we made, and pop it into our layout and resize the frame a bit under its properties. Maybe change the map scale too. Remember, the smaller the second number, the bigger the map appears. Just like dividing by 2 makes a bigger number than dividing by 4. Our layout looks pretty boring right now, so we are going to go back to our map view and swap out our current base map for the light gray base map, and turn off the reference layer to help our information stand out more. As you can probably tell, our challenge is to stylize the entire map after the movie's aesthetic, all while looking somewhat passable and informational. Quick side note, Jim Jarmusch commented that he likes shooting some of his films in black and white because it removed a lot of the visual information that color gives, which allows the viewer to focus on the story better. The same also applies to maps. When there's less information, it can help things stay clear and focused, but it also can blur the whole thing together if we're not careful. Sometimes black and white can help focus a map, sometimes it can ruin it. We'll see how this one turns out. Let's go back to our layout and turn off the map frame border. And then Insert, Rectangle, fill the entire layout, and then under Properties, we adjust the symbol to a dark gray. And we better stack our map layer on top of this. If we give our background a dark color, it will help support our nice two-tone base map, and then we can have darker elements on top of that. Basically, we want to make a visually layered Oreo. Or Hydrox. It's better, although still a bit flat. In the movie, most of the tables are in a checker-like pattern. We can do the same here by going to the rectangle symbology, and after removing the line stroke that we won't be using, we duplicate the fill layer. After changing this new one to a hatched fill, we give it a light color, a width of 20, and a separation of 90 looks good. Now we simply go to the symbol layers and duplicate this one and subtract 90 from the angle to rotate it a quarter turn counterclockwise. Or for the youth, rotate it to the left. It currently looks a little too organized and staged, so let's maybe subtract 20 degrees from each rotation so it's not so perfect. That looks good, but it still could use a bit more. Let's give ourselves one more symbol layer. This will be a picture fill, and for the picture we use this rocky wall texture with transparency, making sure to reset its size. Giving it a pure black tint looks nice, I think, so now it kind of looks like the map is on a beat-up tile diner table. Bringing a little bit of weathering and texture into a project brings a little bit of life and reality to it. Our map itself has some good contrast, but it's still a bit boring. Plus we need to actually make the connections. But before that, we save our project and take a quick coffee break. Oh, before I forget, let's take out a polygon tool of choice and create a border for the map itself. Instead of pure black, we go into the stroke layer and give it kind of a medium gray. Duplicate it, make it thin and lighter. Instead of an offset, we give it a move effect. Move it up and to the left, and drop this below the main one to create a highlight effect. We do the same but reversed with transparency to create a shadow. We will keep the fill layer at the lowest layer level and set it to a picture fill and reuse our rocky wall texture again with a light tint and adjusting the size so it looks more like a papery texture instead of a table texture. Coffee break! Now that I've stalled enough, time to finally figure out how to deal with this big clustering in New York. To me, the most obvious course of action is to have an inset map that shows a zoomed in view of the area. But first we should see another reason why we should make an inset map. Let's go under labeling in the context ribbon for the point feature layer, select the name field, and symbolize the text to something dark with a little bit of halo, and in a handwriting looking font. Make sure to turn on the labeling for this layer though, in order to actually see the text. While this works for zoomed in views, when we look at our finished layout, we see that some of the labels can't even draw. So we will be using both the normal labeling method, but also place some labels by hand. Since we are going to make some unique changes to this inset map, we need to make a new map with the same information. Simple Control-C, Control-V usually works. And we'll place this one in the big empty space over here. Under the labeling context ribbon, we go to the SQL query and use various logical expressions to tell the computer what we want it to show, or in this case, not show. This query will look at the name field is not equal to, and then a name in the inset map that we don't want to show in the big map. I also renamed some of the items in the contents pane as I should have done long ago, just to keep track of everything. Coffee break. After doing this with all the New York City names, our layout looks much better. But there are still some names that are not showing because of a lack of room. We're going to add Iggy, Renee, Bill, Taylor, Jack, and Meg to the Do Not Display list, as they are basically on the same point. But we can now add a text box with their names and place it wherever it looks nice. Of course, this text doesn't match, but we can adjust the text symbol and give it the same attributes as our labels. We do this for all the congested labels that we want to, and again, there are better ways of doing this. But for now, this is what I'm doing. While we are here, we can even add little arrows to indicate the specific locations, using the arrow tool of all things, and also fix the border of the inset map, placing it below the frame layer. We have two more elements before we are done, the points themselves and the lines. I think it would work well, and look cool, to go for a thumbtack and string connection kind of thing. To make the thumbtack, we go to the symbology for the points and change their symbols to this picture element of a thumbtack, scaling it so it looks good. And we do that for both maps. Now the connecting string. Since I don't have any laying around, we will instead use some pre-made string found on a Creative Commons picture. I've already cut it out and made sure it has a transparent background by using a photo processing program of choice, or by using Microsoft Paint 3D if you're cheap like me. Our measurement lines that we created earlier will be for informational use only, so we will ignore them for a bit longer. I'm going to instead make each connection by hand, since I want full control over all personal connections. In the map, not in life. To do so, I use the super fancy tool, the curve. Simply place the line where we want it to be, and because I want it to look taut, it will mostly be straight. Edit its stroke to a picture stroke, pop in our image, and realize that it is still in color. So we use some bleach in a well-ventilated area off-screen, and we're back with a nice grayscale string connecting our points. Don't rinse, just repeat. Our final step for the strings is to give them a shadow. We simply copy and paste our strings, match the two endpoints, and then change its tint to a transparent black. For longer passages, we edit the vertices, just move the blue handles, and boom, sag. The same process also works to remove sag. These context shadows are what really help ground, or unground, an item in a layout and give it a sense of reality. Now you may be thinking, Quincy, why not just duplicate the picture fill in the string symbol editor, give it a move effect with a dark transparent tint, and then have the shadow baked into the symbol all at once so you don't have to have a whole extra layer for the shadow. It's a much easier way of doing things that takes half the time and is twice as not confusing. And you'd be right, but if you're looking for practicality, just copy cartography wizard John Nelson like everyone else does. Or at least should. All jokes aside, John Nelson is a wonderful resource for useful and fun mapping projects, and is marvelous at inspiring people to take mapping beyond the defaults and to find interesting tips and tricks to do things. He was a big inspiration for me to get a little funky with mapping, and while I don't think he's done a movie-themed map yet, he has produced a lot of content on how to accomplish basically everything useful in this project. Plus, he's funny. All seriousness aside, we now group the strings and shadows, and then group them again for the fun of it. And then realize that the points are part of the map, meaning that if the strings are layered above the map, they're layered over the points, which looks weird. But if they're layered below the map, we just can't see them. Well, we could make the points all over again in the layout view so we can organize things differently. We instead will do the wonky way and create yet another new map. Copy our points from our first map, and turn off everything else in that map. We make sure that it is in the same projection as our first map, turn off all the labeling on this new one, as we don't need it, and then in our layout we can add this points only map frame and match them up. Now the points are where they need to be in a very convoluted manner. We can press the lock icon on the top map frame, so we don't select it while clicking things. So there's at least one useful tip. We will now finally use the line distance measurements we made so long ago. We can right-click the lines, open the attribute table, and see the distances between each pair of points. Clicking on the row highlights the line, which is nice too. We're going to make it look like somebody wrote the legend on the map by hand, so we can simply add a text box and add in our information, using the distances we calculated previously. We will do this for all the scenes, so coffee time lapse. Timelapse Quincy is going to work all the way through adding all the text to the layout, and will add a bunch of additional textures, images, and effects to the project. I did intentionally add the text in a wonky manner, a mix between handwritten notes and assigned a guitar kind of vibe. This is to reflect, in theory, something Jim Jarmusch said about preferring making notes by hand as it represents the train of thought and mental connections, rather than typing it up. A bit ironic. One thing I'm doing for the inset map is that I use the polygon tool to add a paper corner, matching its color to the lightest part of the inset map, and then using additional polygons with black fill and about 60% transparency to create shadows for it all. and since it is layered below the border frame with a paper fill, it automatically receives that texture look as well. For the rest of the graphics in the map, I just imported them as a PNG with transparency and then added shadows to help ground them in the layout. I was going to go through this part in more detail, but in the end, it is basically the same process as what we have done so far. Get the image we want, drop it in its grayscale, adjust. The images for this project were Creative Commons assets, and occasionally I used a website to convert to a grayscale image. Even though I am skipping through this part, adding the final touches to things is one of my favorite parts of map making, especially with this more aesthetics-oriented project. As a cartographer, when you make a map, you are always balancing what to add, what to throw away, and what to exaggerate as you convey the information. You may have noticed that when we calculated the distance between the points, it calculated the shortest real-life path, and when I added the string, it represented the shortest path as if the map was on a table. It could have been calculated that way in the first place, but I felt it was most in line with the information and the message of the map to represent the real-world data in a way that was in line with the presentation, even if the lines measured and the lines displayed are technically different. And with a final swig of coffee, we are done. Now that I've distracted you for a little bit, I have hid the last few changes I did off screen, and hopefully this monologue helps you forget some of the details you saw, so that you can experience the map in a mostly fresh way, along with everyone who skipped to this point. So without further ado, and in honor of those just joining us, oh, wrong file. Here we go. And with that, thank you for watching all the way through. I know I had a blast working on this. If you enjoyed this video, then great news. I have a few more ideas like this in the works that will be coming out sometime between soon and never. If you did not particularly enjoy this video, thank you for skipping ahead to the finished product. But there's still some good news for you also. There will be some varied videos on this channel coming out in the not too distant future that you may enjoy that are non-map related. Either way, I'm glad you decided to join me on this wacky mapping journey. I hope you enjoyed yourself as much as I did. Thank you for watching, and take care. C-O-F-F-E-E, yes, that's the dream for me. I fill my mug with the dark brown mud, C-O